3 million pages of evidence, thousands of unsealed flight logs, millions of data points, names, themes, and timelines connected. You are listening to the Epstein Files, the world's first AI-native investigation into the case that traditional journalism simply could not handle.
Welcome back to the Epstein Files. This is our final episode, 64 episodes of documents, testimony, and evidence. Today, we examine the legacy, what society learned, how to prevent this, how to support survivors. Our final assessment, we are going to walk through the final chaotic release of documents from the Department of Justice, some of which were released and then immediately deleted. We will look at the 2015 Maxwell files that exposed the network, the massage manuals that codify the abuse, and the financial structures that protected it. And finally, we look at the government closing the case and what that means for the future. Let's start with the battle over the archives themselves.
It's really the only place you can start. I mean, when you think about it, the legacy of this whole thing, it isn't just a memory, right?
Yeah.
It's the physical record. It's these documents. And the legacy is also the fight over what gets seen and what gets buried.
And that fight it's so messy. I've spent the last few days just trying to navigate this one massive archive. They call it the pinpoint database. It's supposed to be the final dump of files from the DOJ.
Yeah.
But, dump is definitely the right word. It doesn't feel organized. It just feels chaotic.
Well, it feels like a crime scene that's been, completely ransacked. What you're looking at there is the end result of something really specific and, frankly, very disturbing.
Okay.
The source material we have shows that the Department of Justice, the DOJ itself, starts releasing all this material, official records, multimedia, logs, everything. And then, almost as soon as they put it out, they start pulling it back.
See, that's what I couldn't get my head around. I'm looking at the file list from the people who archived it, and there were just dot holes. The notes say very clearly the DOJ released files and then deleted several of them. Just gone.
That is not how this is supposed to work at all. When the government unseals evidence, especially from a case this big, it should be a one-way street. You redact, you review, you release.
You don't hit the undo button.
You do not hit undo.
Unless you realized you showed your hand. You released something you shouldn't have.
Exactly. Or, unless somebody made a call. Yeah. Unless there was pressure to get something back that had already slipped through the cracks.
It's a good thing we're not just relying on the government's version then. This news organization, Courier, they were watching. They stepped in and just mirrored everything.
They grabbed it all.
They grabbed it all before the scrub was finished. So this database we're looking at, this pinpoint database, it's basically the shadow archive. It's what the government wanted us to see and what they very quickly decided we shouldn't.
And that difference right there is so important for the legacy of this case. If you're asking, what did we learn? Well, lesson number one is that transparency is never a given. It's a fight.
Always.
Even now. The main guy is dead, his main accomplice is in prison, and there is still an institutional reflex to hide, to pull back, to delete.
So what was in those deleted files? The archival team's notes, they're pretty clear. They say the retained database, the one with the deleted stuff still in it, contains data connecting the whole operation to high-profile figures. Okay. And the description specifically says that some of the deleted files had mentions of Donald Trump.
And look, we have to be really precise here.
Of course.
A mention is a very broad term. It doesn't automatically mean, there's a smoking gun in that one file. But it means relevance. It means there's a connection there that someone thought was important.
But that's the whole point, isn't it? If it was just a passing innocent mention, why delete it? Why draw attention to it?
That is the question that just hangs over this entire archive. By deleting it, the DOJ effectively put a giant red flag on it. They took something that might have just been a footnote and they turned it into a full-blown mystery.
It creates a vacuum.
It does, and that's part of the legacy we're dealing with. The government's own actions, the sort of release and delete cycle, it has actually fueled more conspiracy thinking instead of providing clarity.
Right. If you just release the whole record, warts and all, people can assess it. But when you start plucking things out,
you're telling the public that there's still a layer of protection. You're saying, even now, certain names, certain connections are just too radioactive to be out there.
It feels like the protection just morphed. During the crimes, it was sweetheart deals and police looking the other way.
Yeah.
Now it's not about protecting the man anymore. It's about protecting the reputations of the network around him.
It's always been about protecting the network, and that network was It was vast.
Which I think brings us to the other huge set of documents we have to talk about.
Yeah.
The pinpoint data is sort of the end of the story, but the beginning of the public really understanding. That goes back to 2015.
Yeah.
To the Maxwell Files.
That was the crack in the dam, absolutely.
It really was. I was reading that retrospective in the News and Why It Matters source, and they talk about that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Before 2015, this was still kind of a weird Florida story.
That weird rich guy in Palm Beach.
Exactly. But after those files were unsealed.
It went global because those 2015 documents, they took the abstract idea of this network and they gave it names and addresses.
And the names were just explosive. Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz, former President Bill Clinton.
And again, to be clear, seeing a name in a court filing is not a conviction. We have to be disciplined about that.
Of course.
But in 2015, seeing those names in black and white, in unsealed documents, it completely shattered the idea that this was just some local problem. It showed the rot went right to the highest levels of the American and British establishments.
And it wasn't just the names, it was the setting. The 2015 documents, they really brought the private island into sharp focus for everyone.
That's such a crucial psychological piece of this. If this is all happening in a New York townhouse, it's a terrible crime. But it's a crime in a city.
Right.
But a private island, that implies something else. It implies sovereignty. It implies they went there specifically to be outside the rules of normal society.
The ultimate getaway.
It's more than that. It's a kingdom.
Yeah.
When you look at the legacy, you have to realize they didn't just build a trafficking ring. They built a microstate. They had their own territory, their own transportation system with the planes, and their own set of laws. The island wasn't a vacation spot. It was a physical symbol of their belief that they were totally, completely untouchable.
And that belief, it wasn't an accident. It was built. It was engineered. And I want to pivot to the mechanics of that, because when you dig into these pinpoint documents, you find things that look so mundane until you actually read them.
You're talking about the manuals.
The manuals. I'm looking at a snippet here. It references complete detailed instruction. It's basically a household staff manual.
This is one of the most chilling parts of the entire case, and it often gets lost in the big splashy headlines about celebrities. We think of abuse as chaotic, as an impulse.
Right, something that just happens.
But these files show the exact opposite. They show a corporate structure, a system.
It reads like a franchise training guide. It talks about basic massage moves on the feet.
Yeah.
It's so clinical.
And that clinical, detached nature. That's the weapon. This is the banality of evil that Hannah Arendt wrote about. You know, if you bring a young woman into a room and say, we're going to commit a crime, her guard goes up.
Of course.
But if you hand her a laminated binder that says, here's the protocol for the guest foot massage and here's how to properly prepare the room, you are normalizing the absolute unthinkable.
Just making it a task, a job.
You are bureaucratizing abuse. You're turning it into a checklist. Step 1, greet the guest. Step 2, begin with the feet. It lets everyone involved, the staff, the enablers, maybe even the perpetrators themselves. It lets them disconnect from the reality of the harm they're causing. They aren't abusing a child. They're following procedure.
And the manual is so explicit about where the procedure leads, but it uses this incredibly soft, sanitized language. There's this one part that says, wash it off, of course. In those cases, the massage often leads to other activities like sleeping.
Activities.
Such an empty word. Activities.
It's a euphemism, and it's designed to just wash the horror clean. By calling it activities or sleeping, they're stripping the violence out of the act, at least in the written record. It's code.
Everyone knew what it meant.
Oh, of course. Everyone reading that manual knew exactly what activities meant. But by writing it that way, they maintain this veneer of propriety. It's sick.
It's gaslighting on paper.
It is. And it creates a legal shield. You know, if anyone ever finds this manual, they can say, look, it just says massage and sleeping. We ran a high-end wellness retreat. It's a cover story that's built right into the system itself.
And that cover story, it extended to everything, the whole environment. I was just floored by the obsession with high-end logistical details in these files. We found snippets about Gulfstream smart parts and a legacy of aviation innovation.
The hardware of the operation.
It's more than just hardware, though. It's the incredible specificity. There are notes about the interior design. I mean, who writes this down? Townsend Leather, Heritage Brown.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. This is where you get into the psychology of it all.
Right.
They didn't see themselves as, criminals lurking in the shadows. They saw themselves as connoisseurs, as tastemakers.
Explain what you mean by that. To me, it just looks like they had a lot of money to burn.
It's about self-image. It's about perception. If you're sitting on custom heritage brown leather, flying in a private jet that's part of a legacy of aviation innovation, surrounded by all the trappings of the global elite, it reinforces delusion, the delusion that you are superior.
So you're not a predator.
You're a patron of the arts. You're a man of refined taste. The luxury isn't just for comfort, it's a mask.
Or a mirror.
A mirror is a better word. A mirror that reflects back this distorted image of sophistication and success. The leather, the planes, the manuals, the art. It all works together to create this bubble world where the abuse feels, to them, somehow civilized. It's the grotesque, dark version of The Great Gatsby. The beautiful shirts are there to hide the rot underneath.
And speaking of hiding the rot with a kind of intellectual veneer, I found something in the files that just stopped me in my tracks. It's a snippet referencing a book title, The Age of Empathy, Nature's Lessons for A.
Yes. The empathy paradox.
It feels like a sick joke. Why in the world is a book about the age of empathy and social skills development in the personal archive of a massive sex trafficking operation?
Because empathy is a tool, and it can be weaponized. We think of it as a virtue, feeling for someone else. But there's a darker side, what psychologists call cognitive empathy.
Yeah, what's that?
That's the ability to understand what someone else is feeling, not to care about them, but to use it to manipulate them.
So they were studying how to fake being empathetic.
They were studying how to use it as a weapon. To be a successful groomer, which is what this entire network was based on, you have to be a master of social skills. You have to know exactly what a vulnerable young person needs to hear. You have to know how to make them feel seen, understood, and ultimately indebted to you.
So seeing social skills development in these files isn't a sign they were trying to be better people.
No, it's a sign they were refining their tradecraft. They treated human connection like it was just another system to be hacked and exploited, just like they hacked the banking system or the legal system.
Which is the perfect segue. Let's talk about the financial side. Because you can have the manuals and the planes, but you can't run this kind of global operation without an incredible amount of money flowing through the system.
And money is supposed to leave a trail.
It's supposed to. But when you look at the financial snippets from the Pinpoint database, it's like reading another language. It's just this dense wall of compliance terms. Broker, fiduciary duty, ordinary course of business.
That's the language of the shield. It's meant to be impenetrable.
There's a section here that's literally labeled fraud prevention and another about money laundering. So the banks, they had the systems in place. The words are right there in the documents.
So how did this go on for so long? Because the systems are built with a back door. And we actually found the key to that back door in the snippets. It's a simple phrase, excluded from the class.
Okay, break that down. What does that mean to be excluded from the class?
So in banking compliance, customers are put into different categories or classes. If you or I walk into a bank and try to wire, say, $50,000 to a weird offshore account, alarm bells go off.
Right. The fraud prevention software starts screaming.
Exactly, because we're in the class of regular customers. But if you're what they call a class 2 client, an ultra high net worth individual, your ordinary course of business might involve moving millions of dollars every single week. So the bank system just looks at it and says, oh, this massive suspicious looking transfer, that's not an anomaly. For this guy, that's just a Tuesday.
So ordinary course of business becomes the excuse to ignore what looks exactly like money laundering.
It becomes the camouflage. The files show that the language of compliance, federal law, detection of criminal activities, it was all there. But it was likely being used to document why they weren't flagging the transactions. They were using the rules to justify making an exception to the rules.
It's a two-tiered system of justice. The fraud prevention is for the little guy. The exclusion is for the rich.
And that is a huge, huge part of this legacy. What we learned is that the financial guardrails we all think are there to stop major criminal enterprises. They're completely porous if you have enough money and influence. The bank stops being a gatekeeper and starts being a concierge.
And when the concierge fails, that's when the lawyers get the call.
The final firewall.
There's one snippet from the legal archive that I just keep going back to. It's talking about the protection of items that came up during litigation. And the phrase is just. It's to disregard this protection now would be to, and then it just trails off into legal arguments.
That is the sound of the legal shield being raised.
But they're not arguing that he's innocent in that document. They're arguing about the classification of the documents.
And that's the strategy. It's what's known as lawfare. A huge part of the legacy of this case is defined by how aggressively the legal system was used not to find the truth, but to bury it. They didn't go to court and argue, he didn't do it. They went and argued, you signed an agreement not to talk about it, or this specific document is covered by a protective order.
They made the legal process itself the issue, not the underlying crime.
Exactly. They turned the court's own rules and procedures into a weapon against the victims. That phrase, to disregard this protection now, that's a lawyer telling a judge, Your Honor, if you release these names, you are breaking the sacred rules of this court. It puts the sanctity of legal procedure above the safety and justice for the public.
And for a very long time it worked.
For decades, until one day it didn't.
Which brings us to this headline we've got from Breaking Points. It just says, Gov closes case.
Sounds so final, doesn't it?
It sounds like they're just wiping their hands of it. The government moves to formally close the case. It signals the official hunt is over.
Yeah.
But looking at these deleted files, at the financial complexity, does closing the case really mean that justice was served?
It means the bureaucracy is finished with it. For the DOJ, a case is a file in a cabinet. When the main defendant dies, you stamp it closed and you move on. It's an administrative act.
But for society?
For society, for the survivors, for the historical record, I can't close the case just because the paperwork is done.
Especially when closing, it leaves 1,000 questions still on the table.
It really highlights the gap between the law and justice, right? The law has an end date. It has a statute of limitations. It has a motion to dismiss because the defendant died. Justice. Justice doesn't have those neat little boxes. Justice is what happens now with these archives, with telling these stories, with remembering.
Well, let's talk about the one time the law actually did seem to work. The arrest of Ghislaine Maxwell. We have that source, Ghislaine Maxwell, in handcuffs.
The image that really changed the game.
The source describes her as elusive. She'd been in hiding for a year. And honestly, based on everything we've seen, the planes, the offshore accounts, the network, I'm amazed they ever found her.
She had the Gulfstream Smart Parts support system. She had the Class 2 banking access. She had every single advantage a fugitive could possibly want.
So how did they get her? Why did the protection finally fail?
Because the public pressure finally became greater than the institutional protection. And this is where it connects back to the media's role in all this.
Right, that News and Why It Matters source.
Yeah.
They asked that question flat out. When is the truth going to come out? And when is the media going to report on this?
And it's a completely fair question. For a long, long time, the mainstream media was just asleep on this story. Or maybe, they were a little too charmed by the heritage brown leather and the philanthropy galas themselves.
The source even notes that U.S. attorneys were frustrated with the mainstream media for not giving it more attention.
Which is a wild dynamic. Normally, prosecutors are complaining that the press is getting in their way. In this case, they were complaining about the silence. But the real legacy here, the real lesson, is that the silence was ultimately broken not by the traditional media gatekeepers, but by a completely new force.
The public. The internet.
Exactly. The social media going crazy when the 2015 files dropped, the independent journalists who wouldn't let it go, the archivists like the team at Courier who saved the deleted files. They collectively created a level of noise and public outrage that the FBI simply could not ignore anymore. Maxwell was caught because the world demanded she be caught.
So the takeaway is that we can't just wait for the institutions to act.
The takeaway is that institutions are almost always reactive. They react to pressure. If the public forgets and moves on, the case gets closed. If the public digs in its heels and demands answers, then the handcuffs come out.
That's both incredibly empowering and kind of terrifying. It means the burden is on us.
It was always on us.
But surely there are agencies whose entire job is this. I mean, we found that document in the Pinpoint database. 2016 National Strategy for Child Exploitation Prevention.
Oh, the irony of that document is just, it's brutal.
It lays out this whole comprehensive plan. It's got all the right words: prevention, investigation, detection. It reads like they have it all figured out.
But look at the date on it, 2016. By 2016, this network had been running at full steam for nearly 20 years. Those massage manuals were probably falling apart. The jets had flown millions of miles.
So the national strategy was just words on paper.
The strategy was for the bad guys we're comfortable catching. It was for the criminal and the beat-up fan. It was never designed to catch the criminal on the private island.
It's that two-tiered system all over again.
It is. A national strategy means absolutely nothing if it has an unwritten VIP exemption clause. The legacy of that document is that you can have all the right strategies and buzzwords, but if you don't have the political courage to apply them to the rich and the powerful, you're not preventing anything, you're just managing public relations.
And the ultimate failure of management. That brings us to the end of the man himself. We have to talk about his death in custody.
We do.
There's that one snippet from the files.
Yeah.
It's just cold, bureaucratic language. It mentions his illness and associated suicide prevention.
Suicide prevention. It's written right there in the government's own files.
No, they knew. They knew he was a risk.
They had a protocol for it. Just like he had a massage manual, the Bureau of Prisons had a custody manual. They had the paperwork. Check the cell every 30 minutes. Remove all bed sheets.
And yet he died.
He died on their watch. And whether you believe that was catastrophic incompetence, systemic negligence, or something more sinister, the end result is the same. And it's the defining moment of the legal legacy. A total failure of accountability.
The survivors never got their day in court.
They never got to face him. They never got to hear him cross-examined under oath. That little bureaucratic phrase, suicide prevention, it's basically the tombstone for the entire criminal case. It represents the moment the state failed to keep the most high-profile defendant on the planet alive long enough to answer for what he did.
It feels like his final, ultimate escape.
It was an escape from judgment, yes. But, and this is so important, he did not escape history.
Because of these files.
Because of the files, and because of the relentless bravery of the survivors.
We've spent so much time talking about the darkness of this legacy. The deleted files, the complicit banks, the legal shields, the failure of custody. But there's another side to it.
There's the resilience.
The survivors just refused to let a closed case be the final word. They refused to let the protective orders and the intimidation tactics silence them forever.
You know, we talk about the mechanics of abuse, but we also have to recognize the mechanics of truth. The truth in this story didn't just bubble up to the surface on its own. It was fought for. Every single page in that pinpoint database, every recovered deleted file, that's a small victory against an empire of silence.
So after 64 episodes, after all of this, where does that leave us? We've seen the absolute worst of humanity.
We have, but we've also seen how the machine works. And once you see how the machine works, how the manuals are used to detach people from morality, how the luxury is used to mask the crime, how the compliance language is used to look the other way, you can't unsee it. You learn how to spot it the next time.
You recognize the pattern.
You recognize the pattern. And that is the true legacy. We, as a society, are now armed with the knowledge of how they did it. We know that ordinary course of business can be a lie. We know that a private island is a giant red flag. We know that a suicide prevention plan on paper means nothing without actual oversight.
We are, I hope, less naive.
We are more vigilant, and that vigilance, that's the only thing that will ever ensure that the prevention strategies of the future are more than just empty words.
In this series, we have established a pattern of wealth-insulating crime, a legal system that hesitated, and a network of survivors who refused to be silenced. We've seen how documents were hidden, deleted, and finally, through persistence, brought to light. To the survivors,
Unless we see you.
The legacy of this case is not just the crimes, but the documentation that ensures it can never be denied. Accountability is not a one-time event. It is a constant vigil. This has been the Epstein Files. Thank you for listening.
You have just heard an analysis of the official record. Every claim, name, and date mentioned in this episode is backed by primary source documents. You can view the original files for yourself at epsteinfiles.fm. If you value this data-first approach to journalism, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. It helps keep this investigation visible. We'll see you in the next file.